Oh, hey, good morning, good afternoon, everybody, depending on what part of this beautiful country that you're in. My name is Sheila Gunreed, and I am the host of our weekly show, Rebel Roundup, wherein we recap the news of the week in an unscripted and spontaneous way. Sometimes I haven't even seen the clips that we are going to watch together, so you will get my raw reaction sometimes to the idiocy or sometimes the best of life, the best of what humanity has to offer us in some of these clips when we see people speaking truth to power. So that's what you're going to get out of the show today. When we talk about politics, we talk about the culture wars and maybe even the smaller culture skirmishes. We talk about the mainstream media largely in a critical way. However, I remain endlessly grateful to the mainstream media because of them, I have a job and they will never get better. And so I have very stable job security thanks to how terrible they are and pending I do something to explode my career on my own. But so far, so good. 8+ years here at Rebel News and no major catastrophes on my hands. I should tell everybody what we're doing here today and how they can get involved. So I told you what the show is all about. It's once a week. It used to be every single day, hosted by myself and David Menzies, and sometimes a rotating cast of characters. However, I think David Menzies is the best man on the street journalist in the entire country, and it is an absolute shame to take him off his beat to put him in the studio for an hour plus every day or even every week. I'm sitting at my desk working, doing many other things for the company. So it's just easy enough for me to flip on my camera and go live, and then we can talk to each other. And that is a really important part of the show, is talking to each other, because this is an interactive show. If you're watching us on the censorship platform of YouTube, thank you so much for sticking it out. I understand why you're over there. I don't know if you're like me, but when they tell me I can't do something or be somewhere, that's how you get more of me. So I understand why you're over on YouTube. However, if you want to support the work that we do completely willingly, unlike what Justin Trudeau makes you do with the terrible and endlessly failing mainstream media, might I suggest you head on over to Rumble and Odyssey, because on those two platforms, you can have your say, but also pitch in a little bit to keep the lights on here at Rebel News. So on Rumble, their paid chat is called a Rumble Rant. On Odyssey, it's called a Hyper Chat. If you leave more than the $5 US minimum, so $5 and above US, hear me now. I'm obligating myself to read it on air, but don't let that be the bar for entry, because frequently we read chats that are smaller than the $5 US minimum, and even the free chats. If somebody's watching on the Rebel News team and they think what you say has been interesting or funny or clever or timely, they'll send it to me in a private chat, and who knows, I just might read it on air. So those are the nuts and bolts of the show. Something I want to tell you about before we move on, and this is near and dear to my heart, and it is only possible through your support. Some of you may know that my documentary filmmaking partner, Kian Simone, who is the head of documentaries here at Rebel News, which is a burgeoning side of the business, thanks to Kian's hard work and his artistic vision and journalistic good sense. But he and I have been working on a new documentary. It follows on the heels of our hit documentary. And I say that because we sold out everywhere we went, all across the country, small towns and big cities. And we're still selling the documentary. You can buy a copy at rebelnewsstore.com. The merch for the documentary was beautiful and compelling. So our previous documentary was called Church Under Fire, Canada's War on Christianity, and it documented just a few of the pastors who stood up to the tyranny and oppression of the government lockdowns because it violated their religious freedom. And they were not men who would, and women, I should say, Pastor Tracy's in there too. They were men who would not bow down to Caesar when Caesar's laws were incompatible with those of Christ. And so you can find that documentary, Church Under Fire. It's on the Rebel News store. So that's my big preamble. I want to tell you about what we've been working on. Some of you may already know, some of you may have already supported our work. It's called Made, the Dark Side of Canadian Compassion. And it is our gut-wrenching documentary on medical assistance in dying and just how we have really fallen down this slippery slope since the inception of medical assistance in dying. And we spoke to activists fighting to stop medical assistance in dying. We spoke to politicians. We spoke to families who have come out the other side of medical assistance in dying. We even spoke to a lady who survived the push for medical assistance in dying. We spoke to veterans. We spoke to advocates for the disabled and the mentally ill. A very hard documentary to make because you were talking to people about the very worst day of their life. And we learned a lot I didn't want to hear, but I knew we had to hear, and we knew we had to tell you. And when we started making this documentary, it's at madedocumentary.com. You can see the trailer there, and I'll show you the trailer in a second. But, when we first proposed the idea that we would make this documentary, we got two responses back largely from the public. And one said to us, this is not as bad as you say it is. They cannot be offering veterans medical assistance in dying instead of a wheelchair. They cannot be offering drug addicts medical assistance in dying instead of drug treatment. They can't be offering the homeless death instead of a house. They cannot be offering people who are leaving the hospital from a suicide attempt medical assistance in dying by the time they get home. People were saying that we were making it up, that it could not be that bad. So that's half of the email responses we got. And the other half of the email responses we received were people telling us that it was worse than even what we could imagine. And along this journey with my friend Kian, it is worse. And I don't think I'm speaking out of turn for Kian when I say he came into this documentary, as he does with many of his documentaries, with a completely open mind. He sort of had the libertarian approach to it, that maybe it's not the government's place to get involved. But he has completely changed lanes to being a staunch advocate against medical assistance in dying. The documentary is finished. We're just polishing it a little bit, but it's finished. We worked on it over this, late winter, early spring. And Kian has made a beautiful piece of journalism that will serve as a damning indictment of Canada's culture for future generations. And we are launching our documentary tour. So far, we've got Western Canada planned. I think the website that Kian is using there is endmade.com, but also you can find it at madedocumentary.com. And for those of you who pitched in to help us make the documentary, and you can still do that because you can pitch in to help us take it on the road. That's at madedocumentary.com. So we're coming to a town and city near you. Also, if you are a church or a venue that would like to host us, please reach out. There's a contact form on the documentary website there. And I think it's one of the most beautiful websites we've ever done. It's an interactive website. And if you're in Western Canada, you can see our tour dates there. And now I'd like to show you the trailer for our documentary. Because I've already told you all about this documentary. I'm hoping you want to come see it, but maybe you need a push over the finish line. This is the beautiful trailer that my friend Kian put together. Olivia, please.
I asked him, and I said, how did they come to the conclusion that I was going to die? He said, because they didn't really know what to do with you.
The government of Canada is killing Canadians, and not just a few, and not just the terminally ill. Over 50,000. So 50,000.
They essentially evicted us from our buildings because we would not participate in this government euthanasia program.
Well, there is a startling new development in the ongoing controversy around veterans being offered medical assistance in dying.
Instead of help, are you familiar with our MAID program? They said, well, it's better than blowing your brains out against the wall.
Canadians are expecting us to get the job done.
Fraser Health is refusing to give information, and because of that, the police investigation had to close. Therefore, Fraser Health is covering information up.
And we know for a fact that our people in power do not take responsibility for anything. Right. So it's a financial save, a lack of responsibility, and then it's completely easy to just offer it to vulnerable individuals, and then they're going to take it.
Personal freedoms are sacrificed, access denied, suffering ignored and then foisted upon the families, all in the name of expediency. These are the stories of the families left behind, of the susceptible, the manipulated, and the endangered, and the people desperately fighting to save them. This is MAID, the dark side of Canadian compassion.
So that's the world premiere of our new documentary, MAID, the Dark Side of Canadian Compassion. As you can see, we tried to speak to everybody that this has touched, or as many people as we could. We could have made a documentary that was 8 hours long because there were just so many stories that were being fed to us along the way. We would talk to somebody and they would say, oh, you need to talk to this person. Or we would be in a town and then working on one interview and then here somewhere, an hour's drive away, that we had to go interview another person who had this crazy story of medical assistance in dying. And that's just how the documentary came together. It was, as I said, hard to do, near and dear to my heart as a person who believes that life begins at conception and ends at natural death, but also for people who were accepting of medical assistance in dying at the beginning, as it was initially sold to Canadians as something that was meant for people whose deaths were imminent and their suffering was intolerable. We interviewed somebody whose family member access MAID as it was first proposed and as it was first introduced. And that person is horrified at where MAID has become. And for a lot of people who were against MAID at the very beginning, they were not oracles. They did not have a crystal ball, but they did have a crystal mind, knowing that anytime you allow the government to get involved in whether people live or die, especially in a place with socialized healthcare, which is just another word for rationed healthcare, it never ends up anywhere good. And when we see where the more radical places of the world are on this issue, Belgium, Holland, it took them 20, 25 years to get to where Canada has gotten to in about 5. So we are the most radical jurisdiction on this issue in the entire world. And You know, even if you are somebody who thinks there's a place for this, I do hope you come to our documentary so that you can see where it has come to. And I don't think it's ending. Actually, we know it's not ending. It's getting worse, right? We know that it will be expanded to include people whose only sole condition is mental illness. And we also know that that's already happening, because you can say, oh, I'm mentally ill, but I also have chronic pain. How do you diagnose chronic pain? You just have to go on the word of the person who's telling you they have chronic pain, which is why it's so easy to get opioids these days prescribed to you. So this is where we're at. It's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. And I hope you come to see our documentary. And again, if you are a venue, a church, a group that wants to bring us there so we can show you this documentary, please go to madedocumentary.com. There's a contact form there. So that's all of that. I thank you for indulging me as I told you about this project that is very important to me. I think our documentary projects will serve as place markers for how bad Canada was during the Trudeau years, because it is so easy to forget once you move away from them. You know, you look back at COVID and it just seems like a fever dream, but it was real. And it was important for us to make a documentary about the pastors there. I think it's important for us to make this documentary because from my lips to God's ears, Trudeau will be gone in 2025 in October. And we should not forget how lightly he treated the lives of Canadians. All right. On that note, let's move on. Speaking of Trudeau and Poilievre are sparring this week in the news. We've got Poilievre calling everything Trudeau says BS. And then Ezra caught the Minister of Climate Change and Court Losses, Steven Guilbeault, on the street, which is beautiful. You see Ezra in like pure goblin mode for like 1.5 seconds in the beginning of the video. I love it. He just like jumps out like a little spider monkey wearing a backpack. It's perfect, Ezra. And then we've got anti-Israel protests erupting on campus. So let's go to Poilievre versus Trudeau. Let's go to Pierre Poilievre visiting an Axe the Tax rally in Nova Scotia. You see, this is something that Poilievre is doing that his predecessor, Andrew Scheer, never did. And that was meet with conservative or at least freedom-minded protesters. Remember when Aaron O'Toole, all the vegetable lasagna people are blending together. Aaron O'Toole refused to meet with Convoy as it was in Ottawa, and he got tossed as leader because of it. So Poilievre's not about to make that mistake twice. So he went to visit a protest that is at the Nova Scotia-New Brunswick border. Let's watch this video, and it is pretty milquetoast, but also true. And instead of dealing with what Poilievre said or didn't say, the media took it in another direction, but we'll get to that in a sec.
Yeah. You guys get a shower? You guys get a shower?
Yeah, a big shower.
Yeah. This is where I sleep.
I know you're getting a tan, bro. You think you're getting a tan?
You are getting a tan.
Yeah, man.
Good to see you guys.
Yeah,
thanks for all you do.
Actually speaks words to just stopping and running.
Yeah.
Never thought you would see anything like this. Yeah, wow.
Yeah. Like I said, there's an outbreak of common sense across Canada.
What's that word again?
Common sense. We're dusting off that word.
Yeah.
Oh, geez, that's been gone for a long time.
Oh, God bless you, man.
We're going to axe the tax.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. And it's going to be in part because you guys stood up and fought back.
Yeah.
People have had enough. They've been told to sit down and shut up and pay up for too long.
Yeah.
And that's going to end.
Well, we can do another 23 days, so. Yeah, man.
Absolutely. We need a
Well, if we have to stay here till November, I'm staying. My boots are playing.
good old-fashioned Canadian tax revolt.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Right on, guys.
Right on.
Keep it up. And let's bring it home.
Yeah, that's great. Hey, thank you, buddy.
Thank you.
Have fun, man.
All right. So he actually visited with anti-carbon tax protesters. You can tell how meaningful it was to the protesters that a politician actually took them seriously. He said, I never thought I would see this. And what he meant was, I never thought I would see a conservative politician standing up for us, a conservative voter, I'm willing to bet. So pretty tame, right? Let's go into the next video of Poilievre basically surprising them. He was driving by and thought, let's go see these guys, see what's what. So this is the controversial thing, which is basically a dinner table talk for the majority of Canadians in this country at this point. But for the CBC, they grabbed their chests and laid down on their fainting couches. And then they had to get out the smelling salts to get back up and do their taxpayer subsidized jobs. So let's go to this next clip.
Yeah, everyone's been screwed over. Right? Oh, people believe his lies. Everything he said was bullshit. Top to bottom. Everything he said. He's going to help the middle class.
He said he did the opposite of the middle class.
Everything. If you can't afford a home, you can't afford food, you're in poverty. So our middle class is destroyed.
All right. So did Poilievre say anything there that the average Canadian feels deeply in their hearts and has no problem expressing in public? No. Everybody knows Trudeau's a liar. Let's start with a few. That he's going to make you better off by making you pay more for everything with the carbon tax. Somehow magically, he's going to take more money out of your pocket when you buy essentials of life in Canada. And then he's going to take that money, cycle it through the hands of 1,000 bureaucrats who do not work for free and do not work without incredible taxpayer-funded government benefits. He's going to do absolutely nothing to grow that money, create nothing, do no work with it, and then magically make it worth more and then give you more. That's his theory, that if you give him money and he puts it through the hands of government, it will magically become more and you will be better off. Cool Ponzi scheme, bro. So that's a big lie. He also, let's just go back a few. He said that he was going to bring clean drinking water to Indigenous reserves. Still a huge problem in this country. He was going to make life more affordable for those in the middle class and those working hard to join it. There are fewer people in the middle class than ever. More people in the food bank lines. I think it's 50% of Canadians are like one paycheck away from absolute catastrophe. I saw my friend Efron. He tweeted some images of people waiting for the food bank, and it was like around the block. So Trudeau's a liar. He's a complete and total liar. He lies about himself. He lies about his political opponents. He lies about everyday Canadians. We know he paints people who just politically disagree with them as awful people. For Justin Trudeau, he thinks you have a moral character flaw if you just disagree with him, if you don't follow him blindly like he's Mao Zedong. Look at this. This is the food bank in Hamilton, the Hammer. Efron was just out and about, caught that image. Seem like you're better off in this country? Like, the thought of owning a home is out of reach for, well, young people, millennials, Zoomers. And for them, climate change is not their number one issue, despite the fact that Justin Trudeau won't shut up about it or quit taxing you for it. It's affordability. It's the idea that they will never have what their parents have. So Justin Trudeau is a liar. He's making life more expensive. Everything he says is BS. Check, check, check. Nothing Poilievre said was a lie there. And it's things that you would say in conversation, waiting in the line at the grocery store, right? Like, it's not controversial at all in this country, except if you talk to a partisan liberal and their pearl-clutching enablers in the mainstream media. So let's go to this video of Trudeau reacting to Poilievre attending the Axe the Tax rally.
Your opponent was photographed posing with anti-carbon tax protesters flying F Trudeau flags. In the video, Pierre Poilievre is heard saying that you are a liar and everything you say is, quote, bullshit. Can we get your response, please?
Every politician has to make choices about what kind of leader they want to be. Are they a kind of leader that is going to exacerbate divisions, fears, and polarization in our country, make personal attacks, and welcome the support of conspiracy theorists and extremists? Because that's exactly what Pierre Poilievre continues to do, not just when you see him engaging with members of Diagolon, but also when he refuses to condemn and reject the endorsement of Alex Jones. Alex Jones is a proven liar and conspiracy theorist who has to pay hundreds of millions of dollars because he lied about the Sandy Hook killing that killed 20 little kids. This is the kind of man who's saying Pierre Poilievre has the right ideas to bring the country towards the right, towards conspiracy theories, towards extremism, towards polarization, towards the kind of lies that Alex Jones is peddling still. So the fact that Pierre Poilievre hasn't stood up to condemn that endorsement, the fact that he continues to encourage the kind of divisive approaches to Canada that I don't think Canadians want to see, really shows that he will do anything to win, anything to torque up negativity and fear. And it only emphasizes that he has nothing to say to actually solve the problems that he's busy amplifying.
It's just pure projection. First of all, he's talking like Alex Jones was in that trailer with those anti-carbon tax people. Alex Jones, who is, as you know, he's on InfoWars. He watches Canadian politics. He said he likes Pierre Poilievre better than Trudeau. Yeah, me too. This is the unhinged ranting, and it's not even ranting, it's like sullen tone policing, scolding. It's like when your mom says she's disappointed in you, she's not mad. She's just so disappointed. That's the tone he's taking with Canadians. But he can ramble on. But more Canadians right now agree with Alex Jones about Poilievre than they do with Justin Trudeau on Justin Trudeau, or with CBC on Justin Trudeau, or Rosie Barton on Justin Trudeau. It's going to be a blowout in the next election. I think the Conservatives are going to take an extra 100 plus seats from the Liberals. It's going to be a super majority. It's going to be the kind of blowout that I think might undo Kim Campbell's legacy of embarrassment, where it was just an absolute blowout for the progressive Conservatives at the time under her very short leadership. I think she served a couple of trimesters as the Prime Minister of this country in the progressive Conservatives. I think she's probably like, oh man, Justin Trudeau is going to take the worst election loss in Canadian history instead of hers. But he's talking like Alex Jones was in the trailer with the carbon tax protesters instead of just sending tweets from an undisclosed location somewhere in Texas, opining about Canadian politics, which are all of a sudden interesting to the rest of the world. Because why? We have an interesting Conservative Party leader, and the shine is off the turd of Justin Trudeau. You know what I mean? They polished that bad boy up in the mainstream media for a long time, but you can't polish that turd anymore, and here we are. Anyway, Justin Trudeau, by the way, the guy who said, sorry, I just dug it up on my phone. Justin Trudeau is telling other people they're divisive. Pardonnez-moi. I didn't hear that right. Because what I did hear was Justin Trudeau saying to the unvaccinated, they don't believe in science or progress and are often very misogynistic and racist. These are just people who made a different medical choice. But again, if you make a different medical choice, it's a moral failing in the eyes of Justin Trudeau, regardless of the reason you made that medical decision. They don't believe in science or progress and are often very misogynistic and racist. Even the Black people who are like, I'm skeptical of government-pushed vaccination programs for a bunch of different historical reasons, by the way. This leads us, as a leader and as a country, to make a choice. Do we tolerate these people? What do you mean, do you tolerate them? What are you going to do to them, Justin Trudeau? Put them on a spaceship, launch them into the surface of the sun? Put them in a concentration camp? Like, what do you mean, do we tolerate these people? 6 million plus Canadians that he decided were unworthy of basic human rights in this country. And he has the audacity, the gall, to say that somebody else is divisive. There has never been a more divisive leader than Justin Trudeau. Divisive? That's how they say it in the UK. Divisive leader than Justin Trudeau. And even the people who were past Trudeau voters are waking up to that fact, where Justin Trudeau is calling their friends and neighbors, family members who chose to not get vaccinated, names, and they're looking at him like, no, they're not bad people. They're not those things that you say they are. And all of a sudden you start to look at Justin Trudeau with a fresh set of eyes. And you start to take everything he says with a grain of salt and a healthy heaping of skepticism. And just today, friends, just today, Justin Trudeau, he's reacting again to people who don't like him. And he says it's okay now to disagree with him, but I don't know, ask Tamara Leach if that's actually something he truly believes in.
There's a video being shared online where you can see an OPP officer telling protesters, one wearing an F. Trudeau hat, which gate you entered at the Alliston event yesterday. Do you consider this a breach of duty, and is it being investigated?
As you well know, I won't comment on operational or security matters, but I am sure that the appropriate folks are looking into whatever reports these are. I think it's important to emphasize and understand that the right to protest is really important. In a democracy, your freedom to disagree with the government is something we perhaps take for granted here in Canada, but that they cannot take for granted in far too many places around the world. The ability to throw out insults at the person of the Prime Minister is something that is protected here in Canada and is really important for people to be able to express themselves. That's really key. At the same time, however, politicians need to be very, very careful that they don't feed into divisions amongst Canadians, polarizations, or conspiracy theories. And I've been thinking about this in regards to Pierre Poilievre. Anyone who wants to be Prime Minister of this country needs to be clear with Canadians about whose votes he wants and who he stands with. If Pierre Poilievre wanted to be a responsible leader, I'll even give him the words. This is what he should say. I reject categorically the endorsement and the support of Diagolon and of Alex Jones. Because Diagolon is a violent white nationalist organization, and Alex Jones is a garbage conspiracy theorist. That's all Pierre Poilievre would have to say. But he won't say it. And that tells you about the kinds of choices he's making as a leader.
Again, what the hell did Diagolon and Alex Jones have to do with any of this? By the way, Justin Trudeau obviously does not believe that it is a Canadian's right to peacefully protest against the government and to call him names because he froze bank accounts over a peaceful disagreement with the convoy protesters who went to their nation's capital. It's a place where all Canadians should feel welcome. They went there to protest the policies of their own government, because where else are you supposed to protest the federal government except in the city that houses the federal government, right? And it's a city of protest. There's protests down there ongoing all the time, constantly. But this large one was effective. And it was this single most effective piece of opposition to the Trudeau government that he had ever seen. And so he reacted poorly. He froze their bank accounts the way that they would do in some of the more totalitarian places of the world. It's exactly what a former Soviet bloc dictator would do. He did exactly that. Locking up protesters, like what they do in Cuba. They also freeze your bank account in Cuba for political dissidents. Venezuela, take the snow away and put t-shirts on everybody. And this is Venezuela. But it happened in our nation's capital. And he has the audacity to say that it is perfectly fine and it's a thing we take for granted in this country to be able to peacefully protest our government. We don't take it for granted. But there are a lot of people scared to do it now because they have bills to pay. And they can't spend 50 days in jail like Tamara Lich did. What sort of violence did Tamara Lich ever do to anybody? Ever. She didn't do anything. She was just this tiny little Métis grandma who scared the daylights out of the most hyperbolic and petty man to ever run a country in the Western world. And I think that's saying something. And for someone who cares about political discourse the way Justin Trudeau all of a sudden does, let us never forget that the guy in Ottawa who was abusing the convoy from his balcony, they call him Balcony Man. He said, "We effing hate you." The man from a balcony in Ottawa said during a verbal dispute with protesters in February 22nd, the hostages, which is, I guess, what he called himself as an Ottawa resident, are getting their effing revenge. Watch yourself. At one point, he can be heard calling a woman a dumb effing C word and a stupid B word. They called him Balcony Man. Well, wouldn't you know, Balcony Man is Doug McDougall. Guess where Doug McDougall works? Some of you are wise enough to guess the PMO, but he didn't make it that high up. Although, who knows? He probably got a promotion. But no, he works as a senior policy advisor for the parliamentary affairs, in the office of the Liberal government House Leader, Steve McKinnon. During the convoy, he worked under Mark Holland. So Steve McKinnon is the guy who tried to say, "How dare you, meanie Conservatives, make Christian Firth of GC Strategies testify before the House of Commons about how he enriched himself making the Arrive scam app." That's who Steve McKinnon is. This guy's current boss, Mark McDougall was balcony guy. Mark McDougall isn't fired. He actually got a promotion. Justin Trudeau is going to tell you that you have to pay attention to every tweet that Alex Jones sends. Freak out about Diagolon. Give me a break. All right. We should hit an ad break. Right, Olivia? I know I've gone way over, and then maybe we'll go into Ezra at New York Fashion Week. No, he's got at the New York Fashion Institute of Technology. We'll go there first.
Calling it taking back our freedoms, but our freedoms are nobody's to take away.
Lich and Barber are charged with mischief, intimidation, and other offenses for their role in the demonstration against COVID-19 measures.
You can see a pattern over the last few years. Anytime you run against the narrative that racist is their go-to. We were accused of taking money from foreign entities, which it's now come out that the Trudeau Foundation has been taking money from the Chinese government. And then we were accused of being infiltrated by the Russians, like foreign interference. Well, I mean, look at the situation that we're in right now.
Tamara Litch, one of the founders and organizers of the Freedom Convoy, has been arrested again. Leach was arrested in Medicine Hat, Alberta for allegedly breaching her bail conditions, so she'll reportedly being brought back to Ottawa to go in front of a judge.
What did you see when you came across? Oh, please tell me.
The most beautiful show of humanity and unity I've ever seen. People were proud to be Canadian again. The two words that I heard the most, the first one was hope, coming all across Canada. It was the number one word I heard, and the second one was pride.
Well, didn't that sneak up on me? Rebel News Live is just 2 weeks away, May 11th in the Greater Toronto area. You can get your tickets at rebelnewslive.com, but great slate of speakers, if I do say so myself. All your favorite rebels, including me, but also Tamara Leach, Billboard Chris, my friend, April Hutchinson. I mean, to get a list of speakers, go to rebelnewslive.com. Get your tickets if you're in the Greater Toronto area. And also, by the way, if you are a freedom-minded business or organization and you'd love exposure to hundreds of people who just love to put their money where their mouths are, and support organizations, causes, businesses that align with their worldview, or even don't care about what your worldview is, because that's, I think, the best we can get in a time when companies are going woke. If you want to sponsor our event or have a table at our event, you can talk to my friend Alex. He's on the other end of the email at ads@rebelnews.com, and hopefully we can get you involved in Rebel News Live in that way too. But if you don't have a business, don't have an organization, you want to come hang out with an army of friends you haven't met yet, fellow travelers in the freedom movement, go to rebelnewslive.com. Now, Olivia, I know that I told you I was going to go to Ezra at the Fashion Institute of Technology, and I will if I have time, but I really want to talk about this UN climate change plastics conference, because the lies about plastic are just so pernicious. I saw a thing a couple of weeks ago about how we have to get rid of microplastics now, these inert little things, because they've permeated into the fossil record, which is the absolute most unscientific and nonsense I have heard in a long time. And I listened to Justin Trudeau and the Liberals talk about carbon taxes, so that should tell you something. But Ezra went to this United Nations Plastics Conference, and it is being hosted by Canada in Canada. Big mistake, Steven Guilbeault, because it makes it real easy for your favorite journalists at Rebel News to buttonhole you on the street. And we did exactly that. And, you know, like, well, I guess I'll get into some more facts about plastic, because if you watch me at Rebel News, you know I love plastic. I'm one of the leading plastics journalists in this country, because the war on plastic is really just a proxy war on Alberta and the oil and gas industry. It really is. I see it for what it is. And I was out of the country covering the Tommy Robinson trial in the UK, so I was unable to go to the plastics conference, which made me very sad, but I was happy to be in the UK covering that story too, which was a good news story at the end of the day. But Ezra was in full goblin mode on the street, and he saw our Environment Minister Steven Guilbeault, and Ezra just like a raccoon on a leftover sandwich. There goes Ezra Levant. So let's roll this.
Minister Guilbeault, you lost a court case to me, and the judge ordered you to pay $20,000, but instead of paying it yourself, you had taxpayers pay for it. Why? Minister Guilbeault, the court ordered you to pay me $20,000, but you foisted that on taxpayers instead. You illegally blocked me on Twitter. You fought for 2 years. You used $250,000 in taxpayers' money, and then you stiffed the taxpayer and foisted the bill on them. Why did you do that? Why don't you think you have to answer for $20,000 of legal bills that you send to the taxpayer to pay your fine? Why aren't you talking about it? You had a lot to say in court. You claimed that your Twitter account was a personal account. If that's the case, why didn't you pay the fine personally? Do you disrespect taxpayers, Mr. Guilbeault? Sure seems that way. Hey, you're on the board of a Chinese agency, a Chinese government agency for the environment. How is that not a conflict of interest, given that you're in the Canadian cabinet? Is that why you never criticized China, the world's largest producer of plastic? Why are your staff pulling at me? Why are they assaulting me, sir? Why don't you ever criticize China? Have you received help from China in your political campaigns too? China refuses to sign the anti-plastics treaty. Why are you forcing that on Canadians?
What does that mean, the registry, Mr. Guilbeault? What do you mean by it? What is the cost that the organization and taxpayer will need to pay for your registry?
Run away! Run away!
You know, it is a shame that, I'm going to preface my statement by saying Ezra Levant's nightly Ezra Levant show is wonderful. But sometimes I feel it is a shame that it keeps him tethered to the studio in Toronto, because isn't he good out there on the street? Isn't he just good? Like, he is just thinking on his feet, and it's hard to walk and talk. And sometimes you can get a little bit of, I don't know what it is, stage fright. I don't want to call it stage fright, but it is hard to think of issues and ask really good questions that are articulately put to a powerful person when you're just being blasted with adrenaline because you can't even imagine you saw this person on the street. And Ezra's really good at that, being smart and thoughtful under pressure. I know all of us can struggle with that. But also, I try to remember when stuff like that happens that I must always be a happy warrior, and that the person is more scared to see me than I am anxious to have run into them. They're usually far more frightened of journalistic accountability, which is why it's so important that we send our Rebel News journalists to the UN Plastics Conference, because that's in Ottawa. Again, a city that is just writhing with journalists, like a wriggling snake pit of journalists. They're everywhere. But these guys know they can walk down the street and no one's going to ask them a question about their plastics hypocrisy, because who's going to ask them the question? CBC? Global News? Never, right? So now the Liberals are getting a little dose of what happens at the World Economic Forum. Once again, a town just wriggling with journalists for a week or 10 days of the year. And up until Rebel News started showing up, they knew they could walk completely unmolested on the street. And I shouldn't use that word when I'm talking about the world's elites, because that's a little too close to home for some of them. But they know now. There's be on your guard, Liberals, because the rebels are going to actually ask you questions. And I just want to go to this tweet first from Alberta's Premier Daniel Smith, because it goes into Alexa's question to Steven Guilbeault. But Alberta's Premier Daniel Smith, one of the leading voices against the unscientific and unconstitutional plastics ban, which, as I point out, is just a proxy war on Alberta's oil and gas. She says that Alberta rejects Ottawa's unconstitutional cap on plastics production. We will continue to demand the federal government, specifically its Environment Minister Steven Guilbeault, who is Daniel Smith's muse at this point, to respect recent court rulings and Canada's constitution. And this is, she's just quote tweeting Rebecca Schultz, who is an Alberta minister here, about how we reject the plastics ban and embrace modern convenience and support our plastics industry as an offshoot of the oil and gas industry. And as some of you may or may not know, it is very significant that China is not signing on to this UN Plastics Charter. And that is because the majority of the world's plastics waste comes from China. I mean, just think about all the stuff you buy from China that's packaged in plastic, manufactured as plastic. So I think China is like 1/2 of the world's plastic waste comes from China, and 1/3 of the plastic in the waterways of the world is from one river in China, the Yangtze River. And so, well, like, why? It's the same stupid stuff as carbon taxing Canada, which is like a statistical rounding error, 1% or whatever it is of the world's CO2 emissions, while cutting China some slack. Well, it's the same thing with plastic because it's the same issue, right? So anyways, Alexa Lavoie asks Steven Guilbeault, our Environment Minister, about banning certain plastics. So let's go to that.
Thank you, Alexa Lavoie for Ribbon News. And my question is regarding, Danielle Smith, the Premier of Alberta. She has expressed to fight against what she called absurd plastic bans. I want to have your thought about that.
I respectfully disagree with the Premier of Alberta on the plastic ban that Canada has put in place. But we don't think that we won't ban our way out of plastic pollution. But we do, and there is a large consensus here, and if you talk to delegates and experts from all around the world, there is an agreement that we should ban those plastics that are either non-recyclable or almost impossible to recycle, that have large impacts on the environment and on human health. But as Inger and others have said, and I've said myself, we will continue using plastic. We need to make sure that we ban those that we don't need, and that we continue using those that are essential in certain sectors like the medical sector, appliances, aeronautics, and we keep those plastics in the economy and out of the environment and out of our body.
I'm just kind of shocked at how unscientific this is. So plastics are dangerous for your health, except if you use them in the medical field. Then all of a sudden they're not dangerous for your health. Am I getting that right? Also, all plastic is recyclable. But first of all, I believe recycling is a scam. So let me just get that out there. But you can either recycle it to be other things, other plastics, or, you can make certain fabrics with it, or finishes, films, whatever. You can do that with plastic, but you can also recycle it into energy, because it is a stored inert hydrocarbon. So just like burning coal or burning oil or burning gasoline or kerosene or anything like that, wood, you can burn plastic. And so once you use plastic for its initial purpose, whatever you've used it for, medical, containers, pipelines, whatever, look around you, everything is plastic. If plastic were killing you, you'd be dead already, by the way. But once you've used it for its initial purpose, guess what you can do with it? Burn it to create electricity or energy, heat, whatever. So you can recycle every plastic. Steven Guilbeault, who's sitting probably at a table draped in polyester, which is just plastic. So, I mean, what a joke these people are. What an absolute unscientific joke. Same people who say that if you give them money, that the weather will get nicer. If you ban plastic, all of a sudden you're going to get healthier, except when you use plastic at the hospital, that's the plastic that saves your life. Okay. All right. Thanks. Bill Nye, the science guy, who's also not a scientist. Let's go, before we get into Ezra at the Fashion Institute of Technology. I bet you never thought you'd see Ezra Levant at a fashion school. But let's go into this. I want to point this out because this is good journalism. It's from Rowan the Stallion, but let's show the video of the guy that Rowan is referring to before we show Rowan's tweet. All right. Because I want you to pay attention who he's talking to. Because I think that's also a crime, or at least a violation of his conditions. So let's show the video of this Palestinian ringleader, and as Rowan describes him, lunatic, Raza Baduhar. He's seen screaming racist obscenities and beckoning little Jewish children to come near him so that he can shout at them. Because Rowan's right, unhinged lunatic. If this guy shouted at my kids, I think I would be in jail. I'd be in jail. You guys would be probably helping fund a lawyer. Help Ezra fund a lawyer to get me out if this guy shouted at my kids the way he's shouting at somebody else's kids. I would break that flag over his skull. You know, testament to the Jewish community, they didn't resort with violence like I might. Anyways, let's show this.
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. It's so wonderful to see all the little kids here, to all the little boys and girls. Ask your parents about your moms and dads to give you a history lesson about how they raped and murdered children. Ask them when you go home today, to all the little kids, ask your parents about the land of Khazar. Khazar is where your people came from. Khazar. You guys are not from Israel or Poland or Russia or Ukraine. You guys all originated from Khazar. This little area, you had no religion. You are not Judaism. You are not Israeli. Right? You guys are from Khazar. You guys crawled out of there. Tell them to crawl back in. That's where you belong. You guys hold signs of murder and rape, but you guys are the ones that rape. Ask your mother. Hey, there's still hope for your generation. For your parents, they're done. They're going to hell. But you guys don't have to go to hell. You guys can go to heaven. And I can see you in heaven. But you guys have to pray to God. Your parents don't believe in God. But there's a chance. Look, your mother is saying don't listen to them. But believe me. Say, hey, call me. Come here. Come on my side to the kids. To the little kids, come on my side. I'll give you my number, and we'll give you a history lesson. Free, free Palestine!
Okay, that's enough. Okay, so he's yelling at the little kids, calling their parents rapists, and telling them to come over to him, and he will give them his phone number. Rowan dug this up. It is the Free Palestine ringleader and lunatic, Raza Baduhar, seen below screaming racist obscenities and beckoning little children, Jewish children. He's revealed to be a convicted sex offender. Oh, but it gets better. Because he is convicted of sexual interference under Section 151 of the Criminal Code, which makes it an offense for any person to touch directly or indirectly any part of the body of a person under the age of 16 years for a sexual purpose. So this guy likes kids. So now, does that make it grosser, more chilling that he's out there calling other people's parents rapists? I don't know what he's convicted of, but it's an invitation to sexual touching, sounds like. Or at least or sexual touching of somebody under the age of 16. He's like, come over here, little children, and I'll give you my phone number. Yuck, right? It gets better because if you are, and this makes perfect sense, because if you are convicted or even on bail for breaching Section 151 of the Criminal Code, which is touching a person under the age of 16 for sexual purposes, you are likely to have been given a prohibition on communication with anybody under the age of 16, which means that shouting on that microphone to little children, speaking to them directly, and then calling them over to his side, beckoning them and saying, come over here, I'll give you my phone number, probably a violation of his conditions. Probably. I don't know his conditions, but that's a pretty standard condition. If you have been convicted of sexual touching of a minor, creep show. Anyway, this is what we're dealing with on the other side. This is what we're dealing with on the calling the parents rapists. All right, let's so we've got that out of the way. Let's go to I know we're over time, but this is in the title and it's in the description of the show today. And it is once again Ezra at his best. It's a shame he's got that show that you all know and love, tethering him to the studio in Toronto. So, for example, if I fill in for Ezra because he's off doing something, please be understanding with me because I'm filling in for Ezra because he is a gift to all of you people when he's out in the world interacting with the public. Let's show this video of Ezra at New York's Fashion Institute of Technology, wherein pro-Hamas protesters have stormed the lobby and they refuse to leave. I also saw that someone pulled the fire alarm on them and then the sprinklers came down and I was like, you know what? At least they're having a shower, which is probably new to them. Let's show Ezra here.
Ezra Levant here for Rebel News. I'm standing at the doorway of the Fashion Institute of Technology, where within the past hour, dozens of activists have stormed the lobby in solidarity with the Hamas protests at Columbia. Some of the people are students, but many of them are not. And as you can hear outside, they're doing their typical move, which is mantras, anti-Semitic mantras, calling for the racial purging of all Jews. They have that phrase, from the river to the sea. They call for basically the extermination of the Jewish people in Israel. They call for the globalization of the Intifada, which is an Arabic word for a violent pogrom. I tried to talk to some of these kids here. They had no idea about anything really, other than they don't like Israel and they do like Gaza. Two of the students there were carrying flags that I said, what flags are those? And they said, oh, that's the Gaza flag. No, it wasn't the Gaza flag. They don't know anything about anything, but it's fun to be here. It's springtime and the young New Yorkers' thoughts turn to excitement. Why not join a protest? Why not be part of a moment? Why not chant and bang on things and stand up to authority? I think most of the people here are useful idiots, to quote Vladimir Lenin. There are some organizers here, on the other hand, who are professional organizers. And there's one weird telltale. You can see there's a handful of Orthodox Jews, ultra-Orthodox Jews, wearing fur hats. They're called the Naturae Karta, a very, very small extremist sect of Jews, not recognized by any other Jews, for their bizarre opinion that Israel should not happen until the Messiah returns. And so they are hired typically by Iran or Iran's proxies to come and join anti-Semitic rallies. And that's enough for the low information protesters here to say, oh, look, even the Jews hate Israel. Low information. But of course, as you can see inside the walls, and we'll just walk around a little bit, it's just like the Columbia protest, professionally organized with matching brand new tents. And I don't know how long this will last, because this is, in some ways, a private institution. Will the university administration crack down on it? Hey, if you want to do something about this, go to our website, deporthamas.com. Our plan is simple. to convince politicians to deport any of the Hamas hate marchers who are not citizens. If they're here on a student visa, they should be students, not spreading anti-Semitic hate. Go to deporthamas.com.
See? It's a shame. We've got to keep him in the studio, giving you guys a show you all enjoy, because boy, he's good out there on the street. Like, think about Ezra when he was at the World Economic Forum, finding Greta Thunberg, finding Albert Bourla from Pfizer. He's good out there. He's just very good on his feet. If you're a journalist, and I watch with great intents because I'm not that good, even after 8.5 years of working at Rebel News, I don't think we can be as good as Ezra out on the street. He's just good. In fact, we've got one. Ezra used to get out a little bit more when he worked way back at Sun News before Rebel News even existed. Because Toronto is it's a protest place, and sometimes he would take the Sun News camera crew and he would go out on the streets. I remember when he found David Suzuki and knocked on David Suzuki's car window. It's like banging on. It was my ringtone there for a little bit when Ezra called me. He was banging. I forget what it was. It was like, what's the story, David? Or what's the story, David? What's the story? Anyways, we've got a clip of Ezra from the Sun News days out on the streets. We just dug it up from the archives, I think yesterday or the day before. Let's show that, because Ezra's always been this good on the street.
No, thank you.
You don't want to talk at a rally?
Not to the Sun.
How come you don't want to talk to the Sun?
Well, because you know why.
Why?
No, thank you.
Are we more critical than other media?
No, thank you.
Will you talk to other reporters?
Yeah.
Is there any other reporter you won't talk to besides the Sun?
No.
Is it because I'm critical of the Line 9 protesters?
It's because Ezra, you know.
And what do you think of Ezra?
Well, he's connected with ethical oil, unethical oil.
And if you had one message to say to Ezra, what would it be?
No comment.
Do you think Ezra's going to show up today?
I have no idea. No idea.
What do you think Ezra looks like? Do you think he's ugly?
Does that matter what his appearance looks like?
He thinks he's ugly.
Well, then...
He's got a low body self-image.
Well, that's his issue.
Any last messages for Ezra if I see him?
No.
No? Okay, nice to meet you.
Low information protesters. Those were the Line 9 protesters. Line 9 was a reversal of a pipeline. And so it was an existing pipeline. They're reversing it. And so it wasn't going to do any real damage to anything, was already existing. And they were protesting against that as low information, useful idiots, as Ezra called them and as Lenin called them. And you saw it right there. They're like, oh my God, I hope Ezra doesn't show up. And Ezra's like, yeah, me too. So, yeah, Street Ezra is great Ezra. Okay, let's get into some of these chats. We got a few today. Annalisa, 1964, longtime viewer, longtime chatter, always really generous and complimentary to myself and David, even when we don't deserve it. And so Annalisa gives us $10 and says, finally getting to watch the live. Missed you. Well, Annalisa, we're so glad to see you back chatting and donating, and just always grateful for your support. You've been with us for years. Ryerson Gary gives us $5. The sociopath, I believe we're talking about Justin Trudeau. I don't need to read any further to know who you're talking about. He claims he wants fairness for future generations. Explain me, Lucy, how can $1 billion a week interest that has to be paid and that debt can never be repaid to be fair? Yeah, the debt servicing charges are killing us on Justin Trudeau's out of control spending. Out of control spending is causing inflation, of course, as you know. But as my friend Chris Sims from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation points out, $1 billion a week in debt servicing charges, that's a hospital a week that we're spending because we spent too much. And when I say we, I mean the royal we as in Justin Trudeau. Because there are a lot of us, including I'm sure many of you who were saying we got to pump the brakes because we just can't spend money and then print money. By the way, if you just You can spend all the money you want and then print all the money you want. Why are you collecting taxes then? Just print more money, right? If it makes perfect sense to just print more money, why do you need mine? Anyway, Nana Awake gives us $10. Did I miss something? As I've never heard PM Sissy Pants denounce Klaus Schwab or the World Economic Forum. How could he? That's Chrystia Freeland's buddy, Klaus Schwab, who looks exactly the way a sinister, power-hungry oligarch on a quest to control the world would look like. You know, these people, it's just so on the nose sometimes. We've got another $10. Guillotine Press agrees with me. Street Ezra is my favorite Ezra. Yeah, mine too. I'm not just saying that because he's my boss. I remember back in the Sun News days, whenever Ezra was out on the street, I never missed his show, The Source. I never missed The Source, because if Ezra was out on the street, like I remember, there's some gold. You can find it on YouTube. Ezra and David Menzies. And it was during Occupy Wall Street, but it was Occupy Toronto. And they went to the encampment after dark. And they would try to talk to the protesters, but as it turns out, many of the protesters didn't stay after dark, even though they were camping out. There's a lot of golden nuggets from Ezra's early days of TV broadcasting. Okay, I think that's it. It sounds like I'm gunning for a raise. I definitely am not. Well, you know, like who isn't? But no, sounds like I'm sucking up to Ezra, but he's just really good on the street. And I'm envious, actually. That's why I'm saying it. I'm envious. I wish I was that good. Well, everybody, that's the show for this week. I'll see everybody. Maybe it'll be me. Hopefully it'll be me. Thanks, by the way, for my guest host last week for filling in for me while I was en route to the United Kingdom. They did a great job. And thanks for all of you for tuning in. Thanks to those of you who pitch in a little bit every week to keep the lights on and who share the stream with their friends who can get to know us here at Rebel News a little bit better. Thanks to everybody who works behind the scenes at Rebel News to put the show together for you when you want to see it, wherever you want to see it. And as my friend David Menzies always says, stay sane.
Ezra Levant for Rebel News. And I'd like to thank the UN for accrediting a citizen journalist outlet like us. Mr. Guilbeault, according to the Globe and Mail, you serve on the China Council for International Cooperation on Environment and Development, which is a government agency controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. Is that a conflict of interest with your role as a Canadian cabinet minister? And is it perhaps why you have really been gentle on China, even though it is by far the world's largest polluter, including with plastics pollution? Thanks again for letting me ask that question.
The Canada-China Council is an organization that has been in existence since, from memory, 1971 or 1972, and a succession of environment ministers from all colors and stripes, including under Stephen Harper. A number of environment ministers sat on this organization. It is a partnership where we exchange information on environmental issues, and we work together to develop public policies that are implemented in China to tackle a number of the things that we're talking about here.
I am the one being punished for speaking truth, yet he can mock females and say, you know, call me a bigot, incite hate, and nothing's being done about that. But I'm the one being silenced by my federation. A lot of women are silenced and feel silenced and that they have no voice, or they're afraid to speak up, fear of maybe getting kicked out of the federation, to be called names, right, for backlash.
They're trying to silence everyone by using me as an example. So, I mean, more and more people are going to be afraid to speak up. When it comes down to sports, which is my platform, it's bodies that play sports, not identities. And we have to stick to